When the fig leaves sprout, summer is at hand. This presentation is different from others because I'm not going to extensively quote scripture. If you visit the blog latterdaydestruction.blogspot.com, you'll find over 50 passages of scripture that describe the end times, and they are extensively tagged by topic. So you can go there and click any topic and pull up many scriptures that speak of prophecies about that topic. I am doing this presentation with a heavy heart. I would really rather not give it, and I have been putting it off for several months, and I feel that this is what the Lord wants me to do right now, and so I'm going to do it because I have to. So why are we talking about these things? Well, if you think about how things are going to unfold, they're going to get worse at an increasing rate. And this is, in math, it's called an exponential function. And this is a little cartoon diagram of that. Human beings are very bad at sensing exponential increase and understanding what that's like. And one of the reasons for this is that we don't do well at repetitive, self-similar patterns. And what do I mean by that? If you look at this graph, and over time, times on the x-axis and on y-axis is how bad things are going to get. If you look at this, you can say, well, things look mostly normal until right about at the end, and then they just kind of go through the roof in awfulness. And so we'll be okay until we're not okay, and then things will be really bad. That's accurate. The problem with this, though, is that were you to zoom in on any part of this graph, the zoomed in part would actually look the same. So you may have heard this analogy before of a frog in a boiling pot. So if you boil the water and throw a frog in, it obviously is going to notice that it's being cooked alive. But if you put it in room temperature water and then just turn the stove on, it doesn't notice that it's slowly being cooked alive. But there is some radical point where the frog is in a lethal situation, but until then he's not, and he can't really notice because it's a gradual thing. Likewise, human beings are really bad at noticing gradual things, even if they're progressing at an exponential rate. And so the purpose of this presentation is to quickly enumerate some of the things that are going to change. And the hope is that when they change, you'll be able to look back and have greater trust in God and realize that He knows the end from the beginning. He knows all the things that are going to happen. And He's giving you a constant stream of information with the intent of helping you prepare yourself for that and everything else that comes after this life. We live in an interesting time in the history of the world. We are the least prepared for these things compared to any generation in the past. And that's because of the level of comfort we've lived at, the unprecedented degree of wealth and affluence that we live in. And that has made us very spiritually numb, and it has weakened, it's created an environment where we could degenerate to the weakest characters that I think have ever been present on this earth. And if you mix all these things together, it's quite a bad situation. So the antidote to this is that you can really come to the point where you trust God without reservation, and you learn how to learn from Him, and you come to truly believe that whatever He teaches you and whatever He guides you to, even if it doesn't make sense now, you absolutely have to follow it, because it will lead you to the greatest degree of joy and happiness. So as the Lord has revealed these things to me, I have tried to remain silent about them. I am increasingly cautious about the things that I share. But as I see these things happening, I am getting messages of urgency that I need to go ahead and say these things, because once they happen, talking about them won't have this effect, the effect of helping people trust more in God. And that's the purpose of sharing these things. What the purpose is not is to scare people or produce an emotional mindset that makes them easy to manipulate, or convinces them to be unwise with their temporal stewardship because they're trying to prepare temporally for what is a spiritual situation. I'm not saying not to prepare temporally, but I am saying that this is not meant to get you to go get more food storage or anything else. It's meant to get you to turn to God and do whatever He tells you to do. I could elaborate on that. I'm not going to. I'm just going to run through these things. I'm not going to try to persuade anyone that they're going to happen. I don't want anyone to believe me that they're going to happen. I want to help people pierce their expectation that things will be normal and go to God and find out what He teaches you about this and all things. So I've organized this topically, and I'll just jump right in. I don't want to elaborate on these things, so I think I'll just read them off. So as far as children go, you'll see that women will struggle to convince men to marry them. And some women will struggle to convince men to have children with them. And you'll see that this becomes a widespread problem. You'll see that governments start creating children in artificial wombs, and they will be raised outside of families. You'll see that governments are going to erode the rights of parents in ways that are hard to expect right now. They're hard to imagine. You'll see that theme throughout this element of surprise, that no one today would expect that it's going that way. But then when it happens, most people will not see it as a radical change. Think of that exponential curve. And that's why it's important to think about what your expectations are now and even document them. Because then when it happens, you'll have a baseline. You won't be a frog in a pot. So what are some examples of these eroding rights? You're going to see it become illegal to homeschool children. You're going to see governments forcing certain medical decisions, including vaccines, but not limited to that. This will include end-of-life decisions and many other things. You will see governments make it illegal to have children, at least without their permission, and possibly more extensively. As far as healthcare goes, the availability and quality of healthcare is going to drop to standards that are unknown to people alive in the United States today, at least people born here. You will see people choose between food and healthcare because that's how expensive those two things will be. You're going to see pharmaceutical companies nationalized, at least in the United States, and this will be in an attempt to keep prices down, and it will be in vain, because the result of that decision will be the radical reduction of innovation in new drug development and treatment development. That will not be the only source of the radical drop in innovation. There are other factors in play, but this is one of them. And existing treatment options are going to diminish. You're going to see people who have the paradigm of just being able to go to the doctor and have their problems taken away. That will be radically removed. There are going to be modifications to known treatable diseases that make them untreatable or unaffordable to treat. There will also be new diseases. We will see the advent of some kind of a superflu that kills very, very many people. Radical weather changes will continue to the point that seasons will lose their distinction. You will see winter weather in the middle of summer, and you will see summer weather in the middle of winter. There's also going to be radical changes in precipitation. You'll see droughts coming in times that were historically times of rain, and you'll see radical, intense rainstorms in seasonal drought time, historically anyway. You'll see extremes of all sort in weather. Temperature, rainfall, snowfall, floods, blizzards, windstorms, these things will become common. Not common in the sense that they become the new norm, but bizarre weather that's outside of the norm will become the new norm. So we'll be desensitized by these things because they will happen so often, but they will be very different from historical trends. You'll see record-breaking hurricanes and tornadoes, not only in intensity, but in the places that they happen. This is another theme. Basically, everything you're used to is going to change. It will be different. There are reasons for this. I don't want to elaborate on that. I've talked about it in another video, but the same thing goes for earthquakes. You're going to see these in increased frequency happening in places that historically were not earthquake zones, and you're going to see scientists coming out and saying, well, they won't come out and say we were wrong about this, but you'll see that they said that certain magnitudes were impossible, and yet you'll see earthquakes of that magnitude. They won't come out and admit they were wrong because they don't like doing that, but if you Google it, you'll see that they have gone on record before and said this is the highest magnitude you could ever have, and you'll see earthquakes that exceed that. So volcanoes, you'll see eruptions in increasing intensity and frequency, and they'll happen in places not known to have volcanoes. You'll see news reports where they say a new volcano was discovered and this thing had an eruption and blah, blah, blah. We're going to see crop yields vastly reduced, which will cause the price of crops to go through the roof, food prices to go through the roof. And this is going to happen from a multitude of factors. Because of the seasonal changes, you'll see reduced yields. Plants don't like extreme temperature changes. You'll see late frosts wipe out entire crops. You'll see new plant diseases that demolish the yields. You'll see pests mutate to become resistant to the techniques for pest control. And you'll see weed control increase in cost. And all of these things are going to cause a constant assault on the yield of these crops and also a big spike in their price. Beyond food prices, there are going to be a lot of other shocks to the economy. We're going to see things that happen that make the currency vastly less valuable than right now. There has been an enormous shift in the value of the dollar since 2008. Well, actually, since a lot longer before then, but especially since 2008 for the modern generation. Most people are pretty numb to that even, but that will be nothing compared to what's coming. Another change is that for a variety of factors, we're going to see that the cost of doing business is going to exceed potential profits in many, many businesses. And this will be one of these new norms that historically, if a business was successful, it would stay successful. And after it sort of rode out the initial startup phase, what you'll see is very well-known brands going completely out of business. Beyond this, I'm not saying all of them all at once. I'm saying it's going to become normal to hear of a business that you know very well, that you thought was very successful, that's been around since your grandparents' time, and it will go out of business out of nowhere. There will also be shortages of goods and services. So you will find that certain goods and services that you're used to are no longer available. You'll also find that some are still available, but they're too expensive for most people to afford. There will be plenty that are still available and still reasonably affordable, but you'll find enough that are how I described, that this pattern will prove to happen. There will be shifts in how people work. There will be more unemployed people than employed people. There will be more part-time workers than full-time workers. In combination, these changes will dramatically shift what you're used to in terms of commerce. There will be a time where you can't do things that you take for granted right now, like get in your car, driving somewhere, and buying something you need, or just going out to eat. Restaurants that you're used to going to are going to close down. You will be inhibited in your ability to just order something off of Amazon or to just go to Walmart and pick something up. Some of these changes will be slight, like you used to buy this one thing off Amazon and now it's no longer available on Amazon, there are no replacements. Some of these changes will be more dramatic. Other economic changes: pensions and other guaranteed benefits will buy far less than expected because of currency inflation, lack of funding, or both. Taxes will increase to unprecedented percentages, and they will also be applied to unprecedented domains. You're going to see these changes to taxes happen in dramatic ways and over short time periods, so they're going to catch many people by surprise. Many people will have structured their whole lives under a set of assumptions, and those assumptions will change in a moment, and they'll just be left with the bill. The cost of living is going to rise so high that you will see city apartments abandoned, just completely walked away from. You're going to see countryside fields with tent cities where people have just fled from the cities and they set up a tent and they're just farming the land where they live, subsistence style. They chuck in some seeds, they hope it rains, they eat what they grow. I'm not saying this is going to be en masse, like the entire population of New York City is going to march into the Midwest and start farming, but people will do it one by one, and you'll see these tent cities crop up all over the place. You'll also see trash shack squatter camps like you see in the third world springing up in all the big cities and in the countryside. You're going to see governments confiscating part or whole of people's personal savings. These are things that right now the expectation is they're off limits from this sort of thing. But you'll see this happening. They'll do it in segments so that they don't trigger a group reaction from the majority. But you'll see governments dipping their hands into people's cash that they have in banks. You'll see them confiscating parts or whole of 401k accounts, etc. Money sources that people think are theirs and the government can't get them, but they will. They'll start grabbing them. You'll also see the feds bail out debts that previous generations would have never expected. So these are things that have nothing to do with the federal government. We're talking about corporate debt. So big businesses take out giant loans or sell bonds, and the feds are going to bail that out. Personal debt, student debt, credit card debt, municipal debt, where cities take out bonds to finance current benefits that future generations have to pay for, and they're going to go bankrupt, and the feds will bail them out. even states. And because this will happen unevenly, because some people and entities live within their means, and this will be a disproportionate bailout because it will target those who have overspent beyond their needs, this will cause massive upheaval, both in the buying power of the currency, and it will cause political and social upheaval because of the imbalance between who's getting the bailout and who isn't. For this and other reasons, riots are going to break out on a regular basis. We've seen a slight uptick in this in the previous years, but I think it's quieted down a bit recently. But it's going to be much worse than that. It will get to the point where, again, it's not like you'll be able to predict, hey, Baltimore is going to riot next week. But it's not going to surprise anyone when every week in the newspaper and in the news, some other city has a riot for some other reason. One thing that's going to happen that I don't think most people predict is that you will see many, many individuals targeted and attacked because of their identity and because of what they said. Now, let me go into each of these. What I mean by their identity is the group, the socioeconomic group that others identify them as a part of. So if people are angry at white males, you'll see white males attacked just because they're white males. If people are angry at black females for some reason, you'll see black females attacked just for being black females. If someone's gay, if someone's straight, if someone's religious, if someone's not, etc. Now, these attacks will happen both to people who are famous for these identities and also people who are completely unknown. So they'll just see you on the street, identify you as pertaining to a certain group, and they'll attack you. People will also be attacked for what they said. Now, this obviously focuses mainly on celebrities, people who have a platform. And because they said this or that, folks will come to their homes or to their businesses and they'll attack them. Or they'll get fired from their jobs, etc. Again, these things will become so commonplace that they won't attract attention. But they will cause dramatic changes to the way business and life are conducted. You're going to see a lot of people who are scared to say what they really believe, and they just toe the line of public opinion, which will be increasingly more difficult because of the balkanization of public opinion, the radicalization of different positions. But they'll have to change the way they do things, and this isn't limited to just what you say and what you admit you believe, but also just the way you conduct business from day to day. For example, tractor trailers that carry food are going to have armed escorts. And this is because if they don't, they will be robbed and people will steal the food. And these changes are going to significantly increase the cost of business and accelerate the cycle of well-known businesses going out of business and increase the cost of food, obviously, among everything else. I feel prompted to mention this as well. It's not on the slides, but you're going to see the breakdown of the social contract. What do I mean by this? The next time you go shopping, you have a shopping day or you're running errands, I want you to stop and think about every aspect of your day that depends on people acting like people. And I want you to remove the assumption that they will act like people and think about how that would change things. So when you go to Walmart, first of all, the fact that there is a Walmart depends on an awful lot of social assumptions. But as you're standing in line to get your prescription, you're assuming, one, you're probably older and on Medicare. You're assuming that people are paying taxes and that Medicare is still funded. You're also assuming that inflation hasn't demolished the ability of Medicare to pay for anything. So as I told you, what they'll do is they'll stop doing cost of living increases on these programs, or at least slow them down so that it becomes more and more difficult to do anything with what you get from these benefit programs. You're standing in line, which is a social construct that is dependent on people behaving in a certain way. And think of that pharmacy. So you've just got a counter, and behind that counter are all these drugs that most people have access to, either through work benefits or through government benefits or through cash on hand. What do you think is going to happen when they don't have money for those things and when they don't care anymore about the value of human life and they're very angry about a bunch of things that have happened? They'll have to put bars on those pharmacies because otherwise people will jump the counter on a regular enough basis to ruin their business plan. And so now you've got bars at the pharmacy so that people don't jump the counter. And now when you're waiting in line, there's no guarantee that as soon as you walk away, you won't get jumped and robbed for your drugs, and so on and so forth. Things are going to change dramatically because the social contract will be broken. Which brings us to war. The United States will be invaded by China and Russia. There will be an EMP and there will be a super flu, not necessarily in that order. What do I mean by a super flu? There will be a biological attack on the United States that's not traceable, and it will consist of at least one, but maybe more, previously unknown biological agents, and it will spread widely across the United States, causing complete chaos as many, many people die and many others are laid up by being sick. And it will happen very quickly because they won't just release this in one place. They'll disperse it in major population centers at the same time. And by the time we have any idea what's going on, it will be too late. During this war, nuclear weapons will be deployed, but there will be strategic zones that they avoid. And one of the reasons for this is that they will attempt to save at least some of the farmland and the cattle. One thing to note is that during this invasion and afterwards, the Chinese are going to be particularly brutal. They will treat people in ways that people can't imagine, even in spite of our movies and TV shows that are incredibly violent. For example, many hundreds of thousands of men will be interred and shipped back to China as slaves aboard the same cargo ships that bring the Chinese troops. Almost all of them will die, either on the way or once they get to China, they'll be worked and starved to death. They'll use them as slaves, but they won't feed them very well, and there will be sicknesses, etc., and almost all of them will die. There will be slaves on U.S. soil as well that are enslaved by the Chinese and the Russians. And they'll be worked to death as well, and this will be disproportionately males of war-fighting age, so teenagers up to 65-ish, whatever. As far as churches go, churches will be radically different in the future. We will see 501c3s discontinued, at least religious ones. That will be for a variety of reasons, but it's going to happen. Christians will be terrorized. So I mentioned identities before. If someone knows you're a Christian, they'll attack you. And because of this, the churches will have to go underground. They'll no longer be able to meet in buildings, even if they can afford to do so with the 501c3 removed. They won't be able to do it because churches will be bombed and attacked in other ways. There will be shootings. And it will also be illegal to preach the gospel. It'll be classified as hate speech, and you'll be punished for doing it. As far as freedom goes, you'll see the government terminate many rights, and I've mentioned some of them here, but there will be more. You'll also see the U.S. inhibit gun sales in new ways. You'll see taxes on ammunition, for example, the same way they do with cigarettes, and they'll get so high that most people will not be able to afford buying bullets or components of bullets for those reloaders out there. You'll see federal, state, and local governments encroach in previously unimagined ways through regulation, taxation, and outright takeover. I want to briefly mention this mark of the beast. There are a lot of ideas out there about how that's going to happen. It's going to be an implant, and it has specific functions that are attractive to society, and I don't want to describe that anymore. But it will be required to buy and sell, just like it says in the scriptures. What is unknown to other people, I think, I haven't heard this anywhere at least, from people, is that this implant will have the capability to influence thought. And I don't know that will be known or advertised when it comes out. It probably won't, just like they don't advertise that, the cell phone manufacturers don't advertise that the government has a back door on all cell phones, and they don't advertise that they're listening to you through your Amazon device or whatever, but these things have been revealed, they've been discovered and published. It'll probably be that way with these implants, but they will have the ability to influence thought, and they may even have a lethal capability. And if you want to study further about that, you could ask the Lord why it is that there's such a stiff penalty for accepting the mark of the beast. And he can elaborate on why that is. The short answer is that it curtails your ability to think and choose for yourself. But you can get more revelation on that if you'd like. In summary, your way of life is going to severely change. It's going to be a severe change. But it will also be gradual in the sense that if you don't pay attention to how things were compared to how things are as these things unfold, you won't really notice what's happening. And I've gone over some things that probably seem quite dramatic to you, and they are. And they will be very traumatic. But still, many people will be numb to these changes, and they won't notice the change, or they'll just, in their minds, imagine that it's a lot less dramatic than it really is. Good and honest people are going to find themselves increasingly compelled to openly oppose society and the government across many areas. And increasingly, they'll have to decide whether to hold fast to what they believe is right and suffer the consequences of that, which will be dramatic, or if they want to assimilate into what they know is not right. And the culminating act is to accept this implant. If they don't want to accept these things, sooner or later they will have to flee to cities of refuge to continue to live according to true principles and follow their conscience. Human coercion and persecution will become so intense that believers will implore God daily to bring the system down for their own relief. They will ask Him to bring the things that are coming so that they can be relieved of the situations they find themselves in. I hope that these topics help you to have motivation to come to trust God more. You will need that in the days to come. And I want to share that it is always a good idea to trust God, that He has never given you a reason to doubt Him in any way, and He won't. He is faithful and true, and He is the definition of good. The more you come to God, the more you'll come to know that, and you will see the evidences of this just stack up in your life until you come to the point where you trust Him completely.